How's it going, Ann Kemp? This is Justin Gibney, president of the Ann Campaign, and this is another civic update where we are trying to raise civic literacy among Christians so that as we go out into the public square, we can engage in a more effective and informed manner. Today, I want to talk about an issue that we probably should give more consideration, which is the relationship between the church and the politician. How should the church interact with our elected officials? And the reason that this is important is because it says a lot about how we will impact the public square. Will we be good stewards and use our influence to be constructive, or will we actually be bad stewards and add to the very toxic nature of our public discourse? Very important conversation that we need to have. And something that I noticed that is very disappointing that I've seen, and you may have seen it too, is that when it comes to our favorite politicians, sometimes we treat our favorite politicians better than we treat our pastor. Let that marinate for a second. We hold our favorite politicians in higher regard than we hold our pastor sometimes. We'll follow them on issues that have moral implications more than we follow our pastor. We'll give our pastor all kind of trouble. We'll set these expectations that are just unreasonable. We'll criticize everything they say. But when it comes to our favorite politician, there's no expectations. I just love you for being you. How can I support you? I'm just happy to be around you. I'm skinning and grinning, just happy to be there. That is not how it's supposed to go. We even have situations for a lot of people that, I don't have a church home. I ain't paying nobody's tithes, but I got my political party. I'm in tune to what my political party is doing. That's not how it's supposed to go. The AND campaign has even found within our messaging that when we critique the church or say something that the church should be doing better, that's when we get the most response. That's when we get the most retweets. That's when we get the most shares. But when we critique a politician that's popular or a certain party, now we've gone too far. Now it seems like we've committed some type of heresy, right? When we critique that. Because people just do not want to hear you critique their politicians or their political tribe, right? It's something that they don't want to deal with. It never fails. Every time we critique Trump or the Republican Party, there's going to be a Christian on the right, a conservative Christian that says, but Democrats kill babies. As if that's supposed to erase every critique of their party, every other assessment of their party. That's all they have to say. Every time, never fails. And it also never fails that every time we critique the Democratic Party, there's going to be a Christian on the left to say, that's false equivalency. Every single time. You can look at our timeline. It happens every single time. And as leadership, we laugh about it because the person usually says it as if it's something so profound. But anybody who's paying attention to politics knows that it's really just a talking point that they probably got from MSNBC or some progressive talking head, right? We cannot take what we hear on Fox News or MSNBC or anywhere else and just repeat it. We have to think through it ourselves, and we have to be more critical. If I come to you and I say, hey, man, that red Taurus, I like the car, but I don't like how it rides. And in the same breath, I come to you and I say that blue Escort, good gas mileage, but it's not spacious enough. I need more space for what I'm trying to do. That's not false equivalency. That's called critiquing two things and holding it to a certain principle, critiquing two things that have to be critiqued, and both parties have to be critiqued. And the AND campaign will continue to critique both sides. This conversation about bothism and the conversation about false equivalency, those are rhetorical devices to avoid being critiqued. We will continue to tell the whole truth. That doesn't mean that we're acting like the two sides are equal. Of course, we shouldn't do that. But just because we critique them in the same sentence or critique them based on the same principle does not equal false equivalency. We have to do better than that and be more thoughtful than that. And I think pastors in some regards have to be more thoughtful about how they engage politicians too. As we know, Trump has a group of pastors that, regardless what he says, are going to defend him. He could talk bad about immigrants. He could call immigrants all out of their name, and they're going to defend everything that he says. That's ridiculous. That is not why we're here to just defend somebody regardless of what they say. And to a lesser extent, that same thing happened in the last administration. President Obama and his administration, when they were going to do something that they knew would offend the faith community or was going against the faith community, they had a group of pastors that was ready to put out press releases and have press conferences to defend something that was not biblically defensible, to defend something at the expense of the church, just so they could have close proximity to power, just so somebody could say that they were evolved, or so that they could feel like they were in the in crowd. That's not how it's supposed to go. We can even look at this 2020 primary where we had Christians who were supporting, defending, and telling people that they couldn't criticize certain candidates before the candidate even said what they wanted to do and how they were going to do it. You were in a situation where the candidate hadn't even put out their platform, but we liked what they said before they even said it. That is not how Christians are supposed to interact. That means that you are indoctrinated. And just because you're educated does not mean you're any less indoctrinated or any less gullible. We got to think through these issues. So again, how should the church interact with its politicians? The first thing I want to talk about, and I think we need to know, is that we should treat our politicians more like servants than leaders. I'm going to get into this in a little bit. More like servants than leaders. Let me give you 3 things that we should do when it comes to politicians. Number 1, we should be vigilant. We have to be vigilant. We should be paying more attention to the policies they're pushing and the votes that they're making than we are to what they're saying to us. Of course, we hear them out, hear what they have to say, but we have to make sure that we're paying more attention to the votes that they're making and the constituencies that they're supporting. One of the things that my church did is that we sent a letter out to all the politicians basically saying, look, how can we help you? Thank you for your service. How can we help you do your job? How can we help you do what's right? And then the second half of that letter said, but just be on notice that we are going to hold you accountable. We are going to make sure that you're doing the right thing. That's how we should go about it. The AND campaign also created a questionnaire to give to churches that allow politicians to come in their church, because some churches do that. But you got to make sure that they're answering the questions that you need to know, because on too many occasions, I've seen politicians go into a church, smile, get to shake hands and do all that. And then as soon as they leave church, they're supporting policies and things that actually hurt the church, right? We have to make sure that that isn't the case. Other groups make sure they have questionnaires and know what they're getting. We have to do the same thing. Number 2, and this will probably be a 2-part series because I have a lot to say. It won't be all on this episode. We have to recognize and reward politicians for doing the right thing, regardless of what party they're in. Regardless of what party they're in, we have to make sure that if they do something right, that we're supporting it. If you're a Democrat and you have a Republican governor that's doing criminal justice reform, you should acknowledge that they're doing a good job with that. And when you do that, what it does is it gives you the standing and it gives you the credibility to later come back and critique them and maybe correct something that they're doing wrong, because now they know that you're being objective. And being objective gives you a credibility that if you're just being partisan, you're not going to have. And that's why the church, we can be in parties, but we can't be overly partisan because we lose some of our standing. Important to know. Also, make sure when there's bad behavior that we're not incentivizing bad behavior. We can't talk about how broken the public square is and then come back and retweet somebody who's being petty. We got to think about that. Lastly, do not be in awe of politicians. You cannot or you will not hold someone accountable who you're in awe of. And let me let you in on a little secret. Most politicians are not leaders in the sense that we think they're leaders. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of politicians with integrity that work very hard, but they're not leaders in the sense that we think they're leaders, because they're actually following behind the constituencies that are pushing them on certain issues and that they know will hold them accountable. That's what they're doing. So we have to make sure that we're looking at them in a different way. We can't hold them in such a high status that we're not willing to hold them accountable. It's kind of like one way to put it is like when your mother used to tell you, look, I'm not one of your little friends. She wasn't telling you that she didn't love you, but what she was saying was you need to understand this hierarchy. You need to understand that I'm here to support you when you do right. I'm here to discipline you when you do wrong. And so our relationship is based on that. Our politicians are more servants than they are politicians. They're here to get our guidance. They're here to listen to what we have to say and do what we need them to do. That's more of a servant than it is a leader, right? But we have to look at it that way. So I'm not saying being disrespectful to them, but we do need to hold them accountable and change our posture.